welcome to the second episode of Talk to Me at Talk to Nima. So today, I'm so excited to be interviewing my good friend Artin, a future engineer. And the reason why I personally wanted Artin to be one of the initial guests, and he's going to be a staple on this channel like Pourshad, is because he is very resilient and he's shown that time and time again. Without any further ado, let's get into talking to Artin about some of the preliminary things of his move to Canada, and let's get into it. So, Artin, tell us a little bit about yourself. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Perfect. I'm very good now that we're shooting the second episode because, to be honest, I've been kind of putting it off because I've been trying to figure out something I'm doing with the channel, and it was kind of eating away at me that I haven't shot the second episode already. And so now that we're doing it, I feel like I'm on over the moon.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Me too. I've been looking forward to this as well. We were supposed to do this last week, but then I got overtime at work, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about your story from the very beginning. So You were born in Iran.
I was born in Iran, in Tehran. I moved to Toronto when I was 2 or 3 years old. And I kind of moved back and forth a little bit. So we settled in Scarborough at first, and then we moved to Richmond Hill. I think I was about 6 years old. And then a year after that, we moved to Edmonton, Alberta. And I stayed there from when I was 7 until when I was about 14, turning 15. Came back and, been Richmond Hill ever since, and then recently moved to Vaughan.
So lots of moving around.
Yeah, lots of moving around.
Nice. And you initially moved to Scarborough.
Yeah.
Drake would be proud.
Yeah, he would be, man. Sure.
Yeah. That's a lot, man. I mean, you've been moving around a lot. I didn't even know this till right now.
Yeah.
That you've moved around that much, which I think is something that really instills in you a sense of I can get through anything.
Yeah, it's like a lot of adaptability, being open to novel experiences, meeting new people.
Because you had to.
I've had to, yeah, of course. I was always very open to it, though. I feel like that's something that's just in my nature. I embrace change. It excites me. It hasn't really caused any stress or trauma on me having to move around a lot. I know for many children, moving around and changing schools is a pretty upsetting experience, but for me, it was never like that.
And so moving around, that's obviously something that's primed you, aside from your, like you said, nature, to embrace change and opportunities to exercise adaptability is obviously something that is exciting to you innately. Let's try to figure out the first time in your life that something extremely stressful happened so that we could really get into it.
Yeah, well, so this is, I'm glad you asked that because that's kind of like the beginning of the story that I was planning on telling anyways. So when I was 16, something happened. We don't really need to touch on what, but as a result of that experience, I developed something called depersonalization derealization disorder.
Depersonalization.
Derealization.
Derealization.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a form of mild psychosis, and usually it's a symptom of anxiety, and that's kind of what brought it on for me as well, anxiety. But it was a chronic anxiety that kind of made it hard for me to tell that it was an anxiety symptom rather than something more troubling. But it was terrifying. I'll be completely honest. So depersonalization, derealization, what it means, well, the derealization aspect is kind of easier to explain, but you just feel like nothing around you is real. You feel like reality itself just feels a little wonky, as if you're inside of a video game, inside of a movie, inside of, reality doesn't feel the same way that it felt before the onset of, that sensation. It was crazy. It was also, so that's the derealization aspect. The depersonalization aspect is, I think, even more unsettling, and that's a dissociation from your own conscious identity and your own physical body. So I would look down at my hand and I wouldn't associate it with myself. It wouldn't seem like it belonged to me. I would look in the mirror. I would feel like I was looking at a stranger. I'd be going on a walk. I would feel like I was on autopilot and kind of like looking at myself, like looking down on myself from a third person perspective.
So something happened to you that we're not really going to get into, but after that thing, you kind of every single day woke up almost in a video game saying, what am I doing? Where is this? Is the world that I'm living in truly real? And I don't even recognize the things I'm looking at.
Exactly. And it was terrifying. And it was, there was so much uncertainty ahead of me. I didn't know if I was going to recover from this. I didn't know if it was going to get worse. I didn't know if I was going to be able to just live with it. And, I had to leverage pretty much everything I had at my disposal in order to overcome it. I had to lean upon my relationships. I opened up to my family about it. I talked about it a lot with my friends. And perhaps most importantly, I had to really sit within myself and reflect and try to just pull in the reins on my own mind, figure it out. And it was a process that took several years, to be honest.
Sounds like you were really struggling with yourself.
Yeah, I felt very uncomfortable in my own mind. You know, you take it for granted. You're your own best friend. You're the person that you spend the most time with, right? And once you become estranged from the voice that's in your own head, it's just extremely uncomfortable.
Wow. We've talked about this a lot,
Yeah.
me and you. And because this is primary chapter in your life thus far, I'm sure you're going to have more important ones that are going to trump this in terms of priority or importance and significance. However, I've never truly thought of it like this up until this point because, you know, for me, I've also been around and I've been Iran, Turkey, Canada, different provinces, different states, in being estranged from my family for some time. And when I was in between elementary and middle school, I didn't have a lot of friends. Like I didn't have any friends, to be honest, because I was just moving a lot. I had no opportunity. And if I did, I was just such a different kid. Because of all the moving that I wasn't able to really find and create those deep bonds, right? So for me, I was the only person I had. And I would always say to myself in my own head, no matter what happens and no matter how big the void seems in terms of relationships in your life, you're always going to have me and I'm always going to be your best friend.
Exactly, yeah.
And to think that you've ever, or anyone like you has ever been, even for one day or 1 hour, talked to themselves and felt like this is a complete stranger in my own head. Wow.
You know, and you hit the nail right on the head because we've had similar experiences in regards to moving around a lot and never as a result of that being able to fully associate with like a group of people that we're around every day because that group is changing, you know, periodically. We develop a much stronger connection to our own personalities and to our own consciousness, basically. And then when that gets ripped away from you and you don't have that support system there to like catch you like that net, it's terrifying. So
it's like you're always falling, always falling.
That's literally what I felt like. I had the sensation like I was just free falling through
forever.
Yeah, through the abyss. So that was a real problem for several years. And I feel like I began to come to terms with it more around the 2 to 3 year mark after it first began. And I felt like I had just, you know, gotten used to it. I was functional. And it wasn't until really a year ago that I fully, I think, eradicated it. And now I don't have that sensation at all. And quite the opposite. I feel very connected to reality,
I'm
very
so
connected to myself. Yeah, I really appreciate it because it's huge. But I'm trying to kind of structure the story in a way that explains its significance to where I am right now. Right. So yeah, like as that began to fade gradually, in its place, I began to develop a lot of brain fog. Right. And I suspect that that's due to the constant stress that I was under. You know, stress does a number on your body and on your brain physiologically, in addition to emotionally, right? So like, you know this, you have a life science background, so you understand these things. But yeah, that brain fog, at times it was debilitating. And that was very important because it began right around the time that I was starting my first year at university. So as Nima mentioned, I'm an electrical engineering student and I'm in New York University right now in Toronto. Before that, I was a kinesiology student at Western University in London, Ontario. And so that's where I went right out of high school. And during my first year, I was experiencing a lot of these brain fog symptoms and what have you, but I was still able to push through kind of because I wasn't taking very difficult courses during my first year. I was like putting off, you know, in kinesiology, you still have to take the sciences, biology, chemistry, in addition to some like basic courses about like, you know, anatomy and whatnot. And I was always pretty good at things like that. So I put off the bio and the chem for my second year. Yeah. And I felt pretty good during my first year. I was doing great, no complaints. I had a good, you know, balance of
pretty stable.
Yeah, exactly. And then second year I came back and I'm like, okay, I have to take my bio and chem courses now in order to progress in this degree because they're prerequisites for courses down the line. At this point, for the first time in my life, I really struggled academically. I always found school pretty easy. I didn't have to put too much effort in order to do well, but the brain fog had reached its peak at this point, and I just felt like I had a learning disability. Pretty much. Wow. Not only that, but even when I managed to learn something, I usually test very well. I will do better on a test than what my knowledge actually should earn me. But it became the opposite. Like I would study to the point where I felt like, okay, I'm comfortable. And then I would do much worse than I expected. And that caused me to doubt myself a lot because I'm already like my self-esteem has never been the greatest. I grew up playing soccer and I played at a pretty high level. One of my former teammates is actually Alphonso Davies. He plays for Bayern Munich in the Canadian national team.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. So like I was playing at a pretty high level and I was really hoping to go professional as well. But my mindset always held me back. I always doubted myself. So then academics is one thing that I never doubted myself until that point, because it was something that I just excelled at without having to try very much. So when it became difficult, I began to question everything. I was like, maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I can't do university. Maybe this isn't for me.
Inevitably.
Yeah, and then I decided to drop out. Actually, I dropped out of Western University, and I told my mom that I want to do personal training. And my mom was very upset because she thought that, you have so much potential.
You have higher potential.
You could do great things. And I actually had to make a bet with her. So I told her that, you know what, then let me go and take an official IQ test. If I score above one standard deviation past the mean, then I'll go to university again, and I'll choose whatever program you want me to go for. And then if I score below, then you'll let me do what I want. So I took the official test, and I scored much higher than what I was expecting. I got a score 2.
We won't talk about it.
Yeah. We don't need to talk about that, the details. But anyways, so I decided
pretty high.
Yeah, I decided to go for engineering.
Yeah.
And despite that, I still had so much doubt. I did not think I was going to be able to pass even my first year courses. And then, I remember I started first semester. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to fail. And I'm a very neurotic person, if you haven't, picked up on that by now. But I leverage my neuroticism in order because talking about big 5 personality traits, right? You have neuroticism, you have extroversion, you have conscientiousness, you have openness, and you have agreeableness. Neuroticism and conscientiousness go hand in hand a lot, because I'm not a very conscientious person naturally when it comes to general things in my life. My room's a mess, like I'm disorganized and all of that. Like,
don't I know it?
It's bad, but my neuroticism directly modulates my level of conscientiousness. When I'm neurotic about something, I become hyper conscientious about that thing.
This is actually very common with a lot of successful people that suffer from low conscientiousness. Their room's a mess, car might be a mess, or what have you. When they really care about something, though, specifically, this is the case with people who have high goals and fear of failure, right? So this is I'm running away from something and I'm running towards something, and I'm so afraid of failing, so I'm completely focused on X task. They have this higher neuroticism, and should those people not have had the high neuroticism, they would just fail because it will weigh heavy on their conscience, right?
Exactly.
So just want to mention that for some of the viewers that feel like that. And Jordan Peterson says it a lot too. In his book, he mentions it, right? The 12 rules for life.
Yes.
And I personally am very big on that myself. It doesn't work for some people, though.
Yeah, because you know why? Because willpower is an inexhaustible resource. When I was pivoting into engineering, and I had to go from a state of not being conscientious about anything to all of a sudden at least being hyper conscientious about that one thing, I needed to train that muscle a little bit. So before I transferred into engineering, I went through this period of my life, and I think you remember this because, we were talking a lot back then about, I was really into biohacking. So I would wake up every morning at 6 a.m., 5 a.m. sometimes. I would take a cold shower. I would do high intensity interval training, just intense sprints. And then I would go on like a 2-hour walk where I would just be listening to, educational podcasts, really just trying to better myself. My diet was impeccable. I was doing intermittent fasting every day, which I still do that. Extended fasts, all of that. I was really like just stretching my willpower to its absolute limits. And then when I really got into the weeds of it, I began to notice that, as long as I'm getting my stuff done, I don't really need to bother with making sure I'm taking the cold showers and doing the sprints and all that.
Because it doesn't matter. As long as you have the essentials and you're just doing what you have to do and the thing you want to do.
Exactly. Because, after you do all of that, it really exhausts you. It taxes your nervous system a lot, and you just want to chill. So
well, it's also a matter of like, you're already getting these positive things done in your head that matter. So then it's like, okay, well, I had these 5 important things to do. Make my bed, cold shower, run, walk, and study. I've done the first 4. So the 5th one maybe doesn't matter today, and then that can become a vicious cycle. I just want to say, like, this is one of the things another YouTuber talks about it a lot, Alex Hormozy, right? So I don't know if you know Alex Hormozy, but one of the things that he always talks about, where he says, wake up, just get your stuff done that you need to get done, and that's it.
For some people, it is essential, especially I feel like if you have ADHD or if you have a very just hyperactive mind, because you actually need to dump some of that excess energy in order to be able to settle down. Your mind's just too chaotic, and if the chaos is amplified by your room being messy and by like things being unkempt around you, then you're just going to be, it's just going to be a mess. You won't be able to handle that. Going back to what I was mentioning earlier, my constant belief that I was going to fail due to my neuroticism, it willed me to go above and beyond. See, I was never a particular overachiever. I never cared that much about making sure that all of my grades were A plus, like
or
hundreds.
beating the competition.
Exactly. I was never that competitive. Like despite being an athlete.
Which is ironic because you were an athlete.
I was an athlete. Yeah, like I never really cared about being better than the people around me. I just cared about being my best self. I wouldn't have put in the effort to be getting A pluses if I knew that I was going to pass with 80% of that effort. But because I was so sure that if I didn't put everything I had into every course, I was going to fail, I was just getting grades that were unheard of in my program. You know, I kind of rode that wave because even like semester after semester, when I continued to match that performance, I still felt like the next semester is going to get me. Next semester is when it's going to get really hard. And then I was asking myself throughout that whole process, like, when am I going to finally rest assured that I'm going to get through this degree? And I always told myself, you know what? If I'm able to get through all of my third year courses, then I'm going to be good. And now I'm in that spot. I got through all my third year courses, like almost straight A pluses, got a great internship. Yeah. Probably the best internship that I could have gotten.
The biggest power generator in Ontario.
Yeah, exactly. So 4-month internship too, which is what I was looking for, because with that, even though I began this program a little bit later in life, I'm 24 right now. I started when I was 22. So entered the engineering program in 2021. It's very uncommon for somebody, if they start in 2021, to actually finish in 2025. Yeah. But that's the path that I'm on, with an internship as well and with a high GPA. So so I can't believe it. I still can't believe it, but it seems like things are working out, and just got to keep working hard and finish it, see it through.
Yeah. Nice. I just want to recap the things that we said before we move on to another topic, right? So I feel like we've covered 2 topics, right? So you've moved to Canada, you've been in many provinces, and your life's been up and down, but you've always been kind of naturally open to this opportunity to exercise your adaptability. And essentially you met your match when your sense of self dissolved. Yeah. Right? And so every day you woke up, and I'm laughing now because we can, but back then it was obviously tragic, right? So you wake up every day, you're like, who is this? This is not me. You're not even yourself. When you're talking to yourself, you feel like this is a stranger, and you're just living like this. And then eventually that starts fading. And then at the same time, brain fog kicks in, specifically at a time where you start a degree and you're telling yourself, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to make sure I do this right, and I'm going to only do this once. And so at that time, you're also getting this brain fog, and you're thinking to yourself, in my last degree, I wasn't even doing the test well, even though I was working day and night to study for those tests. And now I'm doing something that is much more technically involved. Essentially, analysis is what engineering is, right? So
I actually forgot to mention one thing. You kind of reminded me right now as you were kind of chronicling it again. But so I didn't talk about how I got rid of the brain fog. I kind of mentioned how I got really into biohacking for a period of time. That was the reason, because I knew that, I just have something going on with my brain right now that's preventing me from performing to the best of my abilities. I was like, okay, how do I fix this? Because back then, there was very little information on it, right? And, I was just kind of in the dark, and I was doing everything I possibly could to fix it. And I'm a very obsessive person, like I said, with the neuroticism. When I have a problem and I set my mind to it, I do everything in my power to fix it. And I tried so many things. I tried neurofeedback. I went to this clinic, and they charged me exorbitant amounts of money to just go in there for like an hour a week. And they just monitored my brain waves. And then it was actually a pretty cool system. So you have delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. Those are the 5 brainwave patterns, right? They're different frequencies. Right. And basically, delta is when you're in deep sleep. Theta is kind of when you're drifting into sleep. Alpha is when you're alert and kind of in a meditative state where you're not like necessarily thinking about anything. Beta is your problem solving mode, and then gamma is when like all of your senses are stimulated. Survival. Not even. It's like kind of. It's actually, you would be in gamma mode when you're in survival, but the example I was planning on giving is like when you bite into a crisp apple, all of your senses are stimulated at once. You get the sound, you get the taste, you get the aroma. So, it's kind of like that. So basically, when I was in a brain fog state, I had an excess of delta and theta activity, which was abnormal for somebody that's in the waking state, right? So then they were trying to train that out of me there was like a background music that was playing. And then every time I went past a certain threshold of delta and theta activity, it turned off. And then I had to try to like come back into the present moment and wake myself up in order to get the music to play again. I don't know how much that helped. I think it could have helped a lot if it weren't just 1 hour per week, but I spent a lot of money on that. And then I did a lot of things with my diet, with exercise, fasting, things to increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which allows for neurogenesis to occur and to just basically replace the brain cells that have been damaged and whatnot. Finally, I spent $3,000 on this thing called a transcranial photobiomodulation device. It's like a helmet.
I remember, I used it.
And then, so it's like emitting red light, which it's shown to be therapeutic, and it was emitting it at a specific frequency that is supposed to promote healing of damaged brain tissue and heal damaged blood vessels in the brain as well. And I used that every day for about 6 months, and I would meditate for 20 minutes straight during those sessions. And
nice.
I did so many things that it's kind of hard to identify which really helped me, because it was like conflated. I don't know, it might have even just been the meditation on its own. But I was able to wipe out all of the brain fog. I don't have any brain fog at all anymore. Nice. And if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have been able to do what I've done academically since then. Yeah.
So through this time, you're trying to combat really your neurosis and your brain fog. So you're biohacking, right? Which is, I think, our number one key point now of how you started to pivot to life's twists and turns, because you said, hey, I have brain fog. I'm not going to leave this up to chance.
Right.
Let me just start doing some additional high leverage things, like let me get my sleep in right. Let me dial my cardio in right. Let me dial my workouts in right. Let me start meditating, diet. Yeah. What am I eating? You're doing all of these things and taking your control back, and you're giving life an uppercut. Yeah. Right? Because those things really matter, right? Yeah, and this is one of the things that I personally, in my life, always, to anyone in my circle who comes to me and says, I'm going through a hard time, I say, okay, this is obviously difficult. You're frustrated right now, but I think we're going to take this time and we're going to try to figure out the things that are in your control at this point, like your sleep, your diet, your working out, journaling, right? Sometimes you need to journal, meditating. You need to meditate sometimes. And so you kind of took this upon yourself and controlled that. And then when you got into engineering, you really pushed yourself. And one of the things also is you understood your psychological profile from the 5 personality trait perspective. And so you really dialed it in as far as you could. And life, as we know it, inevitably gifts those who try with the goal they are trying to achieve. So at this point now, you've gotten past your neurosis, thank God, and are in your co-op internship right now. And you're really guarding this now. And this is one of the things that happen when life takes your control away from you and you take that control back and you set your life right. There's this kind of value that you perceive to that life that you essentially fought for and now have, and you guard it and you say, I'm not letting you or anyone else F this up for me, because I have worked so hard for this and I know what it's like to not be this way.
Exactly, man. Because even throughout the whole process, I was like surprised at how able I was to stick with it. And looking back, it's like, of course I was able to stick with it, man. I had to like fight through so much to get here. I'm not going to let anything come in between. But, one other point that I just remembered, going back to the brain fog for just 1 second, I talked about all those biohacks that I did, and those did improve it, of course. But this slipped my mind earlier, but the brain is a highly self-adaptable mechanism. So I did all those things actively in order to try to repair the damage that had been done. Those interventions, they managed my problem a little bit. But it really wasn't until I actually got into engineering and started to really like struggle through engineering work that my brain just shifted gears. Because think about it, up until that point, I was using my brain for the purpose of stressing myself out. The brain fog wasn't the primary issue. The primary issue was the psychosis, right?
Right.
That was much more distressing than the brain fog was. So it's like the brain fog was the lesser of two evils.
That's so true.
Yeah, exactly. So my system just realized that, okay, either we're going to be in full in full gear and, be overthinking to the point where this guy's going to think that he's not a real person, or we're going to downshift, slow down, and he's going to feel murky. And that's kind of what I settled into.
Right.
And then when I gave myself something else to shift into high gear for that wasn't causing me any emotional trauma, then I shifted back into high gear, and I've been feeling great ever since.
Right. That's really interesting. So inevitably, though, I mean, I'm so excited, and specifically calling out Dr. K.
Yeah.
If healthy gamer, okay,
Yeah.
if you can get on a podcast with me and Artin and explain to us what is happening here, because wouldn't that be
These
awesome?
are my theories, bro. I'm not like, I didn't like really research the neuroscience behind this, but I mean,
and I'm taking your word at it, because obviously you know so much more inevitably because you experience this, so you've probably like been exposed to information on it. I don't know anything about the science behind brain fog. Right. So I would seriously love, because we both watch Healthy Gamer, right? So that would be awesome. And I'm calling you out, Dr. K. If you can get on a podcast with us, I promise you it'll be worth your time, and we'd really appreciate it.
And like, look, my point of bringing this up actually was to kind of touch base back onto the theme of your podcast, right? It's about, because you were talking about how when you do the right things, life rewards you. I'm trying to make it a bit more concrete and say that when you're on the right path, your brain naturally shifts gears. And it adapts to what it needs to provide for you.
I was going to say, you started engineering, which is something that there's actual goals and deliverables and concrete evidence that you've done it right. It's not a feedback loop. It's not like I'm stressed, I'm thinking about it, fixing the stress, and then it's this paradox because trying to fix the stress makes you stressed. So it becomes a feedback loop, and now you break the feedback loop because you're channeling that energy towards something that gives you the result of A+.
Exactly. Now there's an unequivocal reward at the end of it, right? When I do all that effort to try to fix my brain fog, it's like maybe I get some relief from it, but it's not unequivocal, because a second later I may be like, oh, hold on, I'm experiencing it again. But when I put in that work and then I walk into the exam room, I walk out and a week later I see my grade and I did great. You know, I get that satisfaction.
So the first thing, take back control in terms of your own biology and your own science. Second thing is, when you're stressed and when you're unhappy and when you're stuck in those cycles, if you can just like meditate, take a step back or what have you, and try to see that you're stuck in a paradoxical loop, channel your energy to the right alleys and get out of those cycles. Like if you're trying to chase happiness, it implies you're not happy, and so you get engulfed in a paradox. If you're trying to chase money, it means you don't have money and you're not the type of person who attracts money, so you get stuck in other such loops of the kind.
And I think like another point that I want to like give that's general to people that are on different paths, because, you know, we're in school, but for people that are just purely doing something entrepreneurial, it's a little bit harder to have that concrete reward system, because, you know, you don't have that test that you can, you know, just get the grade on and be satisfied with that. So it's very important for you to set unequivocal milestones for yourself, so that along that path, you're getting that reward system activated, so that you know that you're doing the right things. Because otherwise, it's going to be tough to keep going.
I've noticed that a lot in other entrepreneurs. I personally never have this. I feel like this could be something we can make an episode and talk about some of these outcomes that you could keep an eye out for, to pat yourself on the back and feel that euphoric sense of getting a result out of the things that you do, because those are important. Those are the positive reinforcements we need, right, as humans.
Exactly.
Moving forward, what would you like to finish this podcast off with? Maybe something that you feel has been the most important lesson that you've gathered from life.
I think it's the importance of your inner monologue, man, to be honest.
The importance of your inner monologue.
So
help me understand that.
Okay, well, I think in words, you know, when I'm just thinking things through, your inner world, let's say, that is your place of refuge. That is what's going to allow you to cope with life's traumas and difficulties. It's going to help you to reason about how to improve your situation. And that needs to be a healthy place. It needs to be a safe space for you. If it's not, then you're just going to be way more vulnerable to external things that befall you in life. So you have to prioritize making sure that you're safe inside your own head. I already talked about how I ended up in a place where I wasn't safe inside my own head, and that eventually I was able to regain that sense of safety. And it became very important to me later on when I was faced with a typical problem, something that's like normal for people to be faced with, right? And when it came to that, I was really concerned, because this neuroscientist, Andrew Huberman, he was talking about men and women in relationships, and specifically in breakups, and about how women tend to experience a greater level of physical and emotional pain as the results of a traumatic breakup from a long-term relationship, whereas men experience less of that. However, men tend to never fully recover from it, whereas women do. When I heard that, I was really concerned, because I'm like, wow, I don't want to be scarred for the rest of my life from this experience. I don't want to be, you know, distrustful in any future relationship and just always thinking about this, you know, experience that I had. It's the inner world that I had that helped me come to terms with it and completely close that chapter and forget about it forever. Obviously, I still recall that it happened, but it doesn't bother me in the slightest anymore. And even in that video where Huberman was talking about like why he believes that it is that women tend to fully recover whereas men don't, is that men tend to have the tendency to bury their problems in other things. Like they just dive deeper into their work and they don't think about the trauma that had just happened to them. Whereas women, they like to, talk things through with their friends. They cry about it. That kind of just helps them resolve the issue, like consolidate it and just, reconcile it, put it in the past and move on. And, me, because I'm a neurotic person, I wasn't able to just dive into my work and forget about it. I wasn't able to do my work for a good few weeks or even up to like a month or two. So I had to really come to terms with it through my inner monologue, through my inner world, because I didn't want to burden my friends too much. Like my friends all knew about what happened. Like I talked to you about it a few times, but I'm the person that has to come to terms with it. I'm the one that has to talk myself through it. And because I was fortunate enough that at that point, my mind had once again become a safe space for me, I was able to get through it.
That's so key.
Yeah.
Because like I have said, this podcast really is a show for highlighting the significance of adaptability and strategies in that pursuit. That's one of the key things, to really be kind to yourself and do the positive of the two things. So if you're talking to yourself, be positive to yourself. If you're thinking in pictures, think of the more positive pictures. Focus on the positive, because as soon as you start focusing on the positive, what ends up happening is that really you're neglecting the negative things that are happening and you're allowing more power on those positive things. And this doesn't mean that you have to push those thoughts to the back of your head. And if you have negative thoughts, because this is also one of the key messages right now in the moment, is that if you're having negative thoughts, you have to kind of point out the elephant in the room. You have to point out the negative thing and focus on it when it's present. But when it isn't, and there's no reason for you to focus on that negative thing or negative things, right? Focus on the positive. Be positive to yourself. When you do that, you see that these two things really go hand in hand, because the more you're focusing on the positive things, after you have focused on the negative thing, it's like, hey man, yeah, there's negative things happening right now, but hey, look, I'm here. Look, there's this positive thing. Look, my mom is right beside me, right? So it's like, focus on the negative when you need to, but also focus on the positive when there's not necessary to look at the negatives all the time.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's the biggest thing, because you don't want to ignore the negatives, but neglect, yeah, you want to be aware of it, acknowledge it, but choose to put your attention to the positive things that are around you rather than fixating on the negative.
And this is the key point. It becomes toxic when people are focusing on negative things, and it becomes especially toxic. And this is something I see in a lot of adults, is this mindset of I have this actual negative experience / problem. Let me put it to the back of my head. I'm not focusing on this. And then starts focusing on other negative things.
Yeah. And sometimes the negative thing that you're choosing not to focus on is actually fixable. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot by not focusing on it.
Yeah.
You could address it.
Right. So double loss. Yeah. So not only could you fix that if you focus on it, by not focusing on it, you're also giving it so much more power, because the difference between, there's a book, last time I talked about my undertakings, reviewing 70 plus books in the last year. One of the most primary messages in all of them is adaptability, flexibility, right? Those things are interchangeable. For me, they go hand in hand. And so one of the books in there is called Power versus Force. I forget the author. Beautiful name. It's called Power versus Force. And really what it talks about is this concept between power, right? Aikido in martial arts, use the person's momentum to move them around, right? In business, it's called leverage, right? It's trying to maximize the output for the force you put in, right? Versus force, I'm going to start and I'm going to do it. And so when you have that approach to life, majority of the time, it turns out statistically that you're going to choose the wrong tactic, because if you're not mindful of the strategy you employ, you're probably going to employ wrong strategies more often than not, right? Or maybe 50-50. And so you're not going to get as many things done, because then it becomes an exponential, in the sense that if you're comparing two competitors, if one is employing power, they assess their strategies prior to execution and they try to maximize their output, versus someone who's a force guy. Let's say even luckily high efficacy and they're doing 60% conversion. And then that other person is just at 95% because they're just always thinking strategy. 100 things happen. This person solved 95 in given time and this person solved 70. This person has 30 problems left. This person has 5. Add 100 more and then this person does the same. This person does the same. Initially, after the first 100, the force guy was back 25 units of results, right? Because this person had 5 left, this person had 30. So this person's back 25 units. After 100 rounds, oh my God, the distance is so, it's an exponential development, right? If you really focus on the power element, you're going to notice that if you can just point out the elephant in the room, you start becoming much less afraid and you gain back your confidence. And in doing that, you move on to actually becoming better versus if you ignore the elephant. Sometimes you'll notice that there's this huge monstrosity. It's just your lifestyle of you're not going to look at it. Not only are you limited to half of your range, but also you're in constant fear. And I know this is a very abstract and philosophical approach right now in this discussion, but the essence of what we're trying to say is that focus on the elephant in the room. If it's solvable, solve it. If it's not, you have seen it. Now you can look around and you can move with much more grace and be the power guy.
You got to ride that elephant, bro. You can't ignore it. You got a higher vantage point if you're on top of it.
That's a great, exactly. Use it as an opportunity, right? Life hands you limes, make a limeade.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm so excited and the perfect time. Like we literally finished our water as this podcast ended, and this has been my longest podcast. I really hope that you guys have learned something about this. As a general overview, we went through some of the preliminary stuff and Artin's struggle with the condition that's unfortunate, but he beat, right? Fist bump. And so his now advancement into engineering, and we're going to bring him back. We're going to talk about how his life is going and whatever side of engineering he tackles and is inevitably successful in. And I really, really am looking forward to bringing you guys the next episode. And in the meantime, have you seen our merch? Have you seen our merchandise? You didn't know? Go on your phone, look at it. Just go to talktonima.ca. So if you go to talktonima.ca, it'll loop you to our main website. And then if you go under the menu and go shop, it's going to take you to our merch. So we have merch now. You could fully buy it. It's to really give you guys some swag, as they call it. Stay frosty. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And if Artin doesn't have anything to say.
No, man, I'm just looking at the merch right now. It's awesome. Challenge accepted. That's cool.
Yeah, and they're really good. The slides are my favorite. There's also a champion hoodie with our logo.
When did you get around to doing this? I didn't even...
Honestly, this was done the first month.
Wow.
Yeah, and you could buy it. If you press view details, you could fully ship it to your house in 3 to 5 business days. You get it in your mail. Of course, you shouldn't, because I'm going to buy a couple and give it to some of the people that have been on the first couple podcasts. And if you don't have anything to say...
No, that's it. It was great being on here, man.
Yeah, cool. I'll see you guys in the next one, and have a really, really great day or night, depending on where you are.